What's going on, everybody? This is Black Men Sundays. I'm your host, Corey Sylvester Murray, and we're talking about generational wealth, finance, business, and mental health. And this is episode 200. So I like to thank everybody that subscribed, whether you're driving to church, whether you're cooking in the afternoon on Sundays for your family. I appreciate your support. Let's go. Now, if you're looking for a mental health therapist, look no further than Dr. Briggs Bowling.
Hi, I'm Dr. Izetta Briggs Bowling. Connect with me for professional mental health counseling and support services designed to help individuals and families navigate stress, trauma, substance use recovery, and life transitions. Email me at drbowling@ibcyclebreakers.org or call me directly at 845-313-4496 for a free consultation. Now, back to Black Men Sundays.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away. I refuse to be the man I was yesterday. Gotta put my best foot forward and elevate.
Today, we have a powerful conversation with two leaders who have dedicated their careers to helping individuals, families, and communities create a stronger financial future. Joining us today, we have Christopher Bush and Lester Jones, the co-founders and managing partners of Duo Wealth Advisors, a nationally respected wealth management firm that manages more than $250 million in client assets. Christopher W. Bush is a nationally recognized wealth advisor, speaker, and community leader whose journey began at Tuskegee University, going Skegee, where he earned his degree in mechanical engineering before spending time as a lead mechanical engineer with ExxonMobil. Today, he uses that same analytical mindset to help families design financial strategies, build generational wealth, and create opportunities for the next generation through initiatives like the Graduate Wealthy Scholarship and Financial Literacy Program. Now, Lester Wade Jones, this brother is no stranger to Black Men Sundays. He's coming back for his second go round. And this brother brings more than 30 years of experience in financial services, financial education, and wealth management. After earning degrees in mathematics and computer science and serving in the Naval Reserve, Lester built a career helping individuals, businesses, churches, and organizations create financial security through strategic planning and disciplined wealth building principles. And we're going to get some of that today for sure. Together, Christopher and Lester have built Duo Wealth Advisors around a mission of helping people not only grow their wealth, but protect it, preserve it, and pass it on. Today, we're talking about what separates high earners from truly wealthy families, the financial decisions that shape generations, the mindset behind ownership, and what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. So without further ado, Christopher Bush and Lester Jones of Dual Wealth Advisors, welcome to Black Men Sundays, brothers. How y'all doing today?
We're doing good. How you feeling?
Feeling great, feeling great.
So all is good. Thank you for
Yes.
having us on today.
Oh, for sure. And I can't wait to have this conversation. Now, listen, before we talk about wealth, I want to talk about wisdom. Between the two of you, you've spent decades advising successful families. What's something you've learned about people that has nothing to do with money, but affects everything they do with it?
The main thing is, I would say, is just their mindset, right? When you think about money, when you think about wealth, the number one thing is your mindset, and then what's your relationship with money, right? How you grew up with money. If you did not grow up with money, have you had money? It all affects what you utilize and then what your relationship is. I think that's the most important to understand. And that's what we do on a lot of our calls with our clients. That's the first thing we want to get to know them as a person, but also what's their relationship with money. I think that's kind of going to serve as that foundation to really start to build a financial system that works for them and that speaks for them, that they can kind of digest, right? Every person doesn't understand wealth, or every person doesn't have the same starting point on it. So if we can find that common ground first, then we can able kind of can proceed there.
It really comes down to a person's priorities in life. And when you talk to different people and what do they prioritize? Because whatever their priorities are in their life, whatever they're trying to achieve in their life, that's what you're going to find their value systems, and then their actions are going to be centered around where their values are. If they value creating, trying to build something, trying to create wealth in their life, then if that's part of their value system, then it's going to be easy for them to embrace the steps and the process of getting there. If that is not something that they value, or they have those type of expectations, then they never will embrace what it takes to become wealthy, or what it takes to become successful in any aspect of their life. So I think for most people, it still comes down to looking at in our core, who are we? What do we value? And what do we want to achieve in life?
And your journey started in very different places: engineering, technology, financial services, but both led you to wealth management. What made you realize your purpose was helping others build wealth?
My journey did not start out with me having a goal to get in financial services. It was actually just the opposite. When I grew up, I grew up in a home that we did not have any wealth. As a matter of fact, I still today believe that we were the poorest family in our community, probably one of the poorest families in the high school that I grew up in and went to. So growing up in that particular environment, then your expectations are different than somebody who grew up in a different way. If they have parents that grew up in an environment to where they had good jobs, and they had they already had money, they aspired to do those things. But for me, my goal was, hey, if I could just go out and get a good job, if I could just get to a point to where I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, then that was all that I could believe that I could ever achieve. So I didn't see myself becoming wealthy. All I knew is I didn't want to be poor. I wanted my kids to have a different life than what we had. I didn't want my family to be able to struggle in ways that I had to struggle as a child. I didn't want my kids to be embarrassed about where we lived, and would be embarrassed about kids, their friends coming to visit them at their home, the way that I was embarrassed as a kid for anybody to come to our home. So my biggest goal in life is to get above that part, just to be able to get above that. And so what led me to this, where my career was, I didn't know what it was going to take to do that. So all I heard was, hey, if you can just go out and get a good job, get a good education, get you a good job, then you can succeed in life. So that's what I went out to aspire to do. I went to college and got a degree. Then I went and got a job in my field, and yet 3 or 4 or 5 years into my career, we were still struggling. Everything that I said that I didn't want, that's where I found myself, is still in that particular financial rut. I didn't know how to get out of that. So it was very frustrating. And so I started talking to some of the people at my job, and one of the guys that was there, we shared an office with. Now, he came from a completely different side of the tracks. His father was a medical doctor. They come in a household to where they had financial advisors. And so one day we were sitting in the office together, and I'm listening to his conversation on the phone, talking to his financial advisor. And immediately I recognized, just listening to that conversation, that, wait, their conversation is a lot different from the people that I'm talking to, because the people that I'm talking to are usually friends, family members that are good intentioned, but just very uninformed, misinformed. So they're giving me advice like, hey man, don't put no money in that stock market. You can lose all your money if you invest in that stock market. Or, if you're going to invest, don't invest no more than you can afford to lose. And I'm thinking like, well, man, I can't afford to lose anything. So I'm just like, I'm scared to death about doing anything as far as investing or anything related to the stock market. And I'm listening to his conversation, and they saying everything just the opposite. They talk about how successful his portfolio is and how much money they're making, and and I'm just like, man, what in the world is going on? So I asked the guy I was working with, and I said, hey, would you think I can talk to the guy that you're working with as far as your finances, and I would like to be able to learn some of those fundamentals. And he was like, sure. So he gave me the guy's number. I called the guy up, and of course, when the guy answered the phone, he's thinking by association that, well, if you're a friend of Brad's, then you pretty much get into the same category as him. You probably got the same kind of assets, because birds of a feather flock together. But he didn't realize that I was a dodo bird. I didn't have the same kind of means that Brad had, And when he started asking me all these questions about my assets, like, hey, what do you have? What kind of assets do you have? Let's talk about your investments portfolio. Do you have your IRAs? How much do you have in this type of account? How much do you have in that type of account? And my answer was like, well, I'm trying to get there. Well, I hadn't quite started that yet, and I'm thinking about doing something like that. And it didn't take long for him to recognize this dude is broke. He has no money. And why are you wasting my time on this call? And Corey, that call came to a very immediate, abrupt ending once he recognized that I had no money. And from there, it just scared me to death because my first instinct, my first emotion was anger. I was like, I can't believe this guy just treated me like this and just rushed me off the phone when he recognized that I didn't have any money to invest. And it went from anger to fear. That fear was, well, how do people like me ever become people like Brad if the people who have the information are not willing to help us to get started? Don't have no heart to try to help us to learn those techniques to get to where the people like Brad are in their life. So I was like, well, how in the world am I ever going to get there? And so that's what led me onto the journey of discovery. I started then seeking, well, if he's not going to teach me, I'm going to have to go learn myself. So I just start asking and I start seeking and I start talking to different people that were in that field. And I literally found this lady that was a financial advisor, and I asked her if I could come and just work for you as an intern for free. You don't have to pay me anything. I'm not looking to get anything out of it, just your mentorship. If I can just glean from your table and start to learn, then that's what I would be willing to do. So Corey, that's what started me on that particular journey, was just the fact that, man, I was just very, very frustrated being in a situation to where I didn't want to be broke all of my life. And I had no clue of how to get out of that rut. And the people who had the information wasn't willing to share that type with people like me and come from my community and my background.
Growing up, my dad he always did real estate growing up. He worked at Chevron Refinery for 28 years. And on the side, he always did real estate. And like growing up, he never really told me why he did it or how it pertains to building wealth, how important it was. My main job was me just to go to work, right? So at an early age, I was hanging sheetrock, fixing drywall, doing hardwood floors, toilets, I was doing everything, right? Cutting grass, right? So that's what he taught me about just a hard work ethic, right? Not understanding that this was a wealth building tool, right? It wasn't until I was 19 to where it was late at night. There was an infomercial that called Dean Graziosi. He came on the internet talking about how to make money in real estate, right? And around that same time, my boss, when I was an engineer at John Deere, he also gave me CDs of Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So on my way home from Dubuque, Iowa to Mississippi, there was a 17-hour drive home. I listened to those CDs. So those two things really kind of changed my mindset about what's important, that me realizing that just going to college, receiving a bachelor's degree, right, in engineering, going to work for a big major company like ExxonMobil was a good, right? I mean, to want to go get a good job, but at the same time, okay, well, if I'm going to be working for the next 30, 40, 50 years, I'm going to have the exact same lifestyle that my parents had. Right. And not to say that was bad, but to say that, OK, well, maybe I can have something different. My mind was expanded to say, hey, I can have real freedom. Right. I can travel the world. I can do things that I want to do. I don't have to have somebody else have a thumb on me. I can say, hey, look, if I want to make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month, then I can do that. Right. But I knew that I could not do that owning a job. Right. I can do that by being an entrepreneur and owning a business. Right. And it really became apparent to me, I would say in 2012. Right. I was working at ExxonMobil for about 5 years at that standpoint. And I was actually working with a high school student trying to get scholarships. Right. So he was entering his senior year in high school, and he was trying to get scholarships for college. And I was working with him, filling out essays, filling out applications to get as much money as possible. And right, when you're trying to go to college, right, and you're filling out essays and doing all these things to get scholarships, you're writing these essays to people that are own businesses, to corporations, to rich and wealthy families, right? That's what you're doing that for. And at that moment, it's like, okay, if I know everything about this student, I know everything about him, I spent so much time, we're working hard for him to get in the best college possible, why don't I have the money, right, to write a check to help this young man go to college? Why are we looking at somebody else to go do that? Does that make sense? So for me, it's like, okay, it was a slap in the face to say, okay, Chris, well, you have a job that pays you six figures at 20. Like, I guess I started making six figures at 22 years old, and I think I was around 26, 27 at the time. So I was making good money, right, from the outside. But I realized that, okay, I was making good money for myself, but I wasn't making enough money to bless other people the way I wanted to, right? Because I couldn't, at that time, I couldn't write a $50,000 check, a $100,000 check to help him go to college. Does that make sense? So what I realized is that, okay, well, if I was able to start a business, as I was able to have an enterprise that I can turn, instead of me having wages, me just working for an hourly wage or a salary, me turn that into profits to where I can have a business, a multi-million-dollar business that just wasn't focusing on making money, but it's focused on also giving back. Right, that I could be that person that other people can write essays to, that other people can come ask and say, okay, you know what, Chris, I'm an exceptional student. I may not come from the best background financially, but I really want to go to college. So now it gave me an opportunity to dream bigger. It gave me an opportunity to say, you know what, right? If I do have a business and I can make that successful, I can give as much as I want to give. So those two things for me really shaped my mindset that, hey, you can do something different, you can do something greater with your life, and you can make a bigger impact. So for me, on that journey was like, okay, that's why people say, Chris, why did you quit engineering to do wealth management, right? It was, it wasn't just to kind of help my parents get out of retire. It wasn't just to help me get a financial education. It wasn't just about me just giving back. It was all those things put together to say, okay, well, I can live a better life and I can shoot for greatness, right? When it comes to building wealth and actually having a business that I can really enjoy and take control of my time and be able to spend so much time with my family like I'm able to do now. I have a 6-year-old daughter that I love, and I'm able to be there present with her, right? I'm not having to, clock in at a job and do those things. I can say, you know what, if I want to take off work because she's sick, or if I want to take off work because, she just wants to spend time, see, I can do that now. And see, all those things started to speak to me when I was in my 20s, making this decision. Hey, should I stay in corporate America or should I leave to be an entrepreneur? Those are the experiences that kind of shaped me to say, you know what, I can go do this, right? And it's like, okay, if the worst thing that can happen, right, is because I fall back on an education, I fall back on getting a job, but at least I can get out there and go try. And I think that's what so many people just need to do is like get the courage to believe in themselves, get the courage to go work, to go put that effort in and say, you know what, I can actually go dream as big as I want to, and I can actually go accomplish something that's worth meaningful.
Now, you both built Duo Wealth Advisors around a family office approach to wealth management. For someone hearing that term for the first time, what does a family office approach mean?
I think when you think about family office, that term family office, it's really about collaboration. Right, that's what it really means. A family office is a word that's in the financial field that it means collaboration, to where you're taking you're from a CPA, an estate planner, a financial advisor, your life insurance agent, your private banker. You're taking all of these roles and activities, right, and these people, and you're able to bring them in pretty much into a round table in a room to where they're collaborating just on your financial plan. Right? Because so many times to where the reason why the wealthy people have a more structured plan is because everybody that they're working with is working together, right? A lot of times if you're not having like a family office feel, you may have an auto insurance agent that never talks to your financial advisor, or a CPA that never talks to your estate planner attorney. So it's no synergy amongst all those roles that you need in order to push your life forward. So what we try to do is bring that family office feel for people that just don't have $250 million or more, because traditionally that's where that family office portion of it comes from, right? Is that if you have a net worth of over $250 million, so that's where the real collaboration typically starts. So for us, we want that same exact feel that the high net worth, the ultra high net worth people get. We want to have that same type of feel for our clients that are maybe just starting out from an investment standpoint, or maybe they're closer to a retirement, or they're in retirement, to where they can have all of those roles synergize into one to collaborate on their specific financial plan, so we know that all parties are working into their best interests.
And Corey, if I can just add to that, is that most families just don't know what they don't know. And they don't, like, many times that they're intimidated by just the aspect of going to an attorney's office and trying to start a conversation about estate planning, or they don't even know how to get that started, or don't even know what's entailed with that. So they don't even know what questions to ask. Or same thing with a CPA or taxes. They don't understand any of these fundamentals enough to where they feel very inadequate about going and having those conversations. So for people like Chris and I, that's our job then, is to, even if what we talk about bringing everybody to the table, that don't necessarily mean that everybody is sitting in a conference room all at the same time. It's a matter of Chris and I making sure that we leverage our information, we leverage our knowledge, we leverage our experience, that when we can set up that, that meeting with and let them know, when we're looking at building their total financial plan, we recognize, hey, this is a point now where we need to add in estate planning. Now is the time to where we need to start talking about, getting a trust for your particular situation, whether we need to build some things around that, having a durable power of attorney, putting things in place to make sure that your estate is going to be, lock and key. But we don't just say, well, now go seek out an attorney. We go out and vet those people. So we already have put people in place to where we have personally vetted them. We've met with specific attorneys, asked them questions. We've talked about them, and making sure that when we send up that person or we bring them into our office, like what I normally do, I'll have the attorney and I set up and I'm going to be there with them, and we having that conversation together. Same thing with the accountant or CPA. We're going to be right there with them to be able to have those conversations, where we can lead them through that process and they're not having to feel overwhelmed because they don't understand a lot of the concepts, or they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of simply because they're not well versed in those particular areas. So that's how we're able to leverage our experience, our information, our knowledge, and to be able to help our clients to make sure that they're going to be where they have everything that they need, but they can, it's all put together under one umbrella under Duo Wealth Advisors.
And you guys work with executives, entrepreneurs, physicians, athletes, and retirees. What's the biggest misconception successful people have about wealth?
I think one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is just that just because they make a high income, that wealth automatically happens. And just because someone has a high income, that doesn't mean to where that their cash flow is together, right? And that's what we want to really look at, is that when I'm looking at a client that's, let's say, that's making over 250,000, other people might say, man, they got it together, they make a bunch of money, right? But at the same time, if their cash flow says that they only have maybe $1,000 or $2,000 extra per month, well, it's the same exact example. If somebody's making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and they have that also saying the $1,000 and $2,000 a month, because what happens is we always have lifestyle creep as our income increases, right? So one of the biggest misconceptions is that income is the sole problem solver, and it's really for us to understand how can we control our spend, and how can we make sure that we have a proper account structure to where our money actually has a job and is going to the right place to assist us into building wealth and kind of keep us accountable. So I think that's one thing I would say. Lester, what about you?
Yeah, for me, as it comes down to, if you look at the people that I have come in contact with and I've encountered that have become wealthy, at some point in their life, they expected to be successful. They expected to end up wealthy. So they started putting things in place that's going to lead them to that. Where people like me, and I can't speak for everybody, but people like me that come from a very poor background, my expectation was not to become wealthy. My expectation was just to, and my goal was just to be able to get a really good job to where I could have a good income, where I could have good enough credit to where I can appear wealthy, where I can finance the things that would make me look like I'm wealthy, where I can wear all the name brand Gucci this and Polo this and all of those kind of things. And my wife could carry, the top of the line purses all on credit. But we got it. If we can drive a BMW, but if we have if the tire breaks, if we have we can't afford the maintenance on it, but we can afford the monthly payment. We want to live in a very high end neighborhood, but can't afford to furnish the house. So there is all of those things where we want to appear wealthy, but because we got a pretty good income, like Chris just talked about, $100,000, $200,000 a year, we have enough income to where we can appear wealthy, but we're not doing the things that will help us to ever become wealthy. And so if you look at our wealth, if you look at our balance sheet, most of our wealth you can define as either we're wearing it, we're wearing it, we're driving it, or we're living in it. And so those are the things that create that prevents a lot of people that have the income to build wealth, but they don't have the habits. They don't have the structure to ever become that, because many of us thinking, well, I ain't never going to become wealthy anyway, but if I can appear that I have made it, then for a lot of us, then that's good enough. So we never really strive to be able to do those things, because we just we do all the things to have the appearance of doing that. And that's what prevents a lot of us from taking that next step and building wealth, because we spend all of our time trying to look like that we have become successful, instead of doing the things, having that delayed gratification, where if we maybe drive that Honda right now as opposed to driving the Range Rover, but we don't want to do that, because we want our friends to think that we've already made it, because I have a really good job working for the government, because I really have a really good job working for Boeing or whatever. Then I've got to, as the young people say, I got to stunt and make it look like I have it. And therefore we never become wealthy, because we spend all of our working years with that high income just trying to appear that we've become that way.
And what's the difference between someone who earns a high income and someone who builds a family legacy?
Well, I think that goes back to what we were just saying, having that high income. Now, you got to start back with, what is it going to take to really build that family legacy? Well, I think it's a couple of things. One is that you got to make building wealth a priority. And as I've said many times when I'm speaking, is that you got to begin with the end in mind. So for people that have really become ultra successful or ultra wealthy, they started early in their life, and they set out to say, hey, I got a goal. At some point, I want to have enough assets to where I never have to clock in again, where I never have to where I never have to produce another paycheck. I was listening to Stephen A. Smith one time on ESPN on First Take, and somebody was talking to him. No, I think it was on his own podcast, when he was talking about, they were bragging about the contract. They go, hey, you got a $20 million contract, man, you're already wealthy. He said, oh, no, let me stop you right there. No, I'm not wealthy. I just got a high income. And he says, no, I work for people that are wealthy. Because he says, my income, having a high income, meaning that they didn't give me $20 million in 1 year. What they gave me is a contract that I have the ability to earn $20 million over several years. So which means that if I do the right things with the income that I got coming in, and if I apply that properly, then I can become wealthy enough to where I never have to go out and work for another paycheck again. He said, but right now I have a high income, which affords me to do the right things to where it's going to build wealth, where I never have to get a paycheck again. So you don't ever misunderstand the difference between what somebody would call, well, he's rich. Well, he's rich because he's got a high income. It still comes down to, are you taking the income and building assets, or are you just taking the income and you just have a high spend, where it means that you got a lot of toys, but are any of those things are going to be building in such a way to where you can later live off of those things that you have created? Those are assets. Or are you putting things are you creating a portfolio of stocks that can later turn in where you can generate an income from that? Or are you building a real estate portfolio to where later, when you stop working, that real estate can generate an income that can still pay you what you were working? So all those kind of things that you're looking for there. Or are you just buying very expensive cars that go down in value? Do you have a lot of high name brand clothes and shoes and those kind of things that's never going to appreciate? They can't pay you, in return, but you paid a lot for them. So wealthy people learn I'm going to be taking the income that I have and creating assets to where that will later pay me in my later years, where I never have to earn a paycheck again for the rest of my life.
I would add to it is just a plan, right? And then also understanding what wealth is, because we always throw around the term wealth and building a legacy, but I think there's also different stages in between, right? Before we can build wealth, we need to also have that foundation of being financially secure. right? That meaning that, hey, based on our income and our savings right now, if we lose our job, if we lose an income for the next 1 to 2 years, can we still sustain the same exact lifestyle that we have today? Right. So once we have that level of wealth right there, then we got to focus on, okay, well, when am I going to be financially independent? Right. Because that's a different level, right? Financial independence is the ability to live off the income of your own personal assets. So before we can leave wealth for other generations, before we can leave a legacy for other generations, we have to be financially secure, financially independent, right, for ourselves. Right. So I always make this for my clients is that every $1,000,000 that you have saved in an account, an investment account, let's say that's earning a 6% rate of return. So technically, you should probably be able to give about $5,000 a month and never pretty much touch that principal. Right. So every $1,000,000 equals $5,000. So if somebody says, hey, I want to be financially independent, right, and I want to have $10,000 a month coming in, more than likely, we probably need to have an account balance of minimum $2,000,000. Right. If somebody says, Chris, I want to have 20 grand coming in a month, right, to where I don't have to work, I'm living off the income from my personal assets, I probably need to have at least $4,000,000 saved up. Right. So that is that level of being financially independent. But then now we're going into that wealth level to where, OK, financial independence is I've achieved that. I'm never going to have a money issue, no matter what my lifestyle happens, no matter what the market does, if the market crashes, if the world goes to, and I will still have money coming in every single month. Now that wealth piece has said, OK, now what can I impact? What can I leave behind? And who can I leave it behind for and to? Right. So I think understanding those different levels and not us just saying, hey, what's, just throwing around the wealth term, understanding there's other levels in between that we need to always accomplish and shoot for and define that for each person.
Most people think wealthy families have better investments. From your experience, is it really better investments or better decisions?
Oh, that's a good one right there, Corey, because it's really not having better investment. I'm glad you brought that up. What you'll find is that the investment part of it is pretty boring, to be quite honest with you, because it's putting money in the stock market is basically where it's just a matter of the stock market will reward people that can be very patient, and it punishes people who cannot. And what I mean by that is that when you put money in the stock market, and then you will hear people will use terms like, man, I know somebody that put their money in the stock market and man, they lost all their money in that. And that scares people from ever attempting to invest because they hear these horror stories about, I put money in the stock market, somebody put money in the stock market and they lost it all. And what I would tell them is, most of the time when people have a bad experience in the stock market, it's usually not what the stock market did. It's usually what somebody did in response to what the stock market did. Let me break that down. What that means is that you will hear people say, you heard the fundamentals of becoming successful in investing is, if you're going to put money in buy stocks, you need to buy low and sell high, right? You've always heard that, buy low and sell high. But what you'll find many people will do is that they'll start out investing based on those fundamentals. Hey, let's go ahead and put some money in, and then the market is doing well, and then they'll see something on television, and they'll start hearing things like, "Oh, we're about to the economy might go into a recession," or we see something that happened like COVID, and you're watching and all these bad news start to happen, and then we get afraid and we start seeing things because the stock market goes down, and then they go and check their account. And their account says, oh my God, I'm down. I done lost $20,000. I done lost $10,000. And they're watching all the bad news on television that's scaring people to death. And now their response is to what the stock market went down. Yes, that is true. But that wasn't the part that was going to kill their retirement. What's going to kill their retirement is how they responded to it. So their response is, now that the market is down, what I think I need to do is go ahead and get my money out and let me put it into something safe over here until the market does better. So in order to get their money out of the market, they've got to take the money out, which means I had to sell. Now, what would just happen? The market went down, so they sold low. But I thought we were supposed to buy when it's low. But no, they decided to sell when it was low. And then their conversation is, so I'm just going to hold it here into something safe until the market, does better. And when it comes back, then I'll get back in. So now the market goes back up. And now they decide, now I'm going to get back in. So in order to get back in, they have to buy those stocks, but now they're at a higher price. So what did they do? They sold low and bought high. And now they wonder, and now their experience is, man, I just got killed in the stock market. This stock market thing ain't working. Well, it wasn't what the stock market did. It was what you did in response to what the stock market did. That's what caused you to have problems. It wasn't the stock market itself. So what you'll find is that it's not that people that become wealthy have better investments. They just have a better plan. They start to get educated on the true essence of how the stock market works. They understand the fundamentals about the stock market. And then they take the advice from professionals. They go and they hire a professional to be able to work with them, because for people like Chris and I, our job is to not just to manage a person's money, it's to managing their emotions, because that's usually the separator between the people that become wealthy in the stock market and people that fail. Is not because the market did so much better for one person than another, is that their emotions got in the way. And that's a big part of what we do, is help to manage their emotions and help them to stick to a plan that we have helped to put together for them. So that's a bigger part of it than anything to me.
Not that the wealthy have better investments, because a lot of the same investments that the wealthy have access to is also the exact same investments that average and ordinary people have as well, right? A lot of the playing field when it comes to wealth is level, right? However, right, I would say another 20% of the playing field is not level, right? What do I mean by that? Because really the difference between the investments between the average ordinary person and the wealthy person is, number one, access, right? The more money that you start to accumulate, right, you're gonna open doors and have a better access to different tools, different individuals, different people, which is your network, right? So now that you have money, you're gonna have a different level of access. You're gonna have a different network of people, right? That's around you to collaborate with, and then that's when what happens is, from there is now you can have creativity, right? A lot of times when about building wealth, you have no clue about how something can actually make you wealthy, because you just may not be in a round of a room or a network have access to say, man, that is a creative way to generate wealth. And I think that's what happens, to where as you start to accumulate and do the basics, right? Having a great cash flow plan, understanding stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, building up your accounts, right? Investing in some real estate, right? Doing those things. Those are things that everybody can do. Owning a business, investing into a business. But then you can kind of think about long-term building wealth. Most wealthy people right now, most of the money is really generated in private equity. Right now, does everybody have access to private equity deals and deal flow? Not necessarily. But see, if you look at the top 100 richest men and women in the world, most of them have came probably from private equity. Right. So I think that's the sliver of wealth that not average and ordinary people have access to. But as their wealth obtains, then you can actually achieve and go through different wealth levels where it makes sense to implement different financial tools, products, or anything else to actually make a holistic financial plan, like Lester was speaking about there.
Now, across every one of the groups Duo Wealth Advisor serves, business owners, executives, athletes, physicians, and retirees, what's one principle that never changes across all those groups?
Having successful habits. Because when you start looking at let's start with athletes, that you just mentioned. I have NBA players that are clients, but then they look at their profession and what separates them, the people that become truly successful as athletes. It all starts back with their habits, their eating habits, their exercise regimen, the things that they do on a day-to-day basis. It all comes down to what are their daily habits. And so everything that you're going to do is that it all starts down to, like Chris just mentioned earlier, starting out when I first got introduced and said, hey, I don't want to just have a job for the rest of my life and just barely making it. I want to become successful. So I started looking and started saying, well, what do successful people do? Well, one of the first things that they do is they make saving money a priority. And so so that becomes a habit. They start saving money on a monthly basis, and they make that a habit. So every single paycheck. One of the old deacons at my church when I was a child, he used to tell us all the time. He said, "Son, if you just take a dime out of every dollar, one of these days you're going to have something." But he didn't say take a dime just whenever you think about it. Whenever you have a dime left over. No, he says take a dime out of every dollar. And so in other words, save 10% of your income, and one day you're going to be wealthy. But that's a habit. For me, it becomes a life. Then over a period of time, saving money becomes a lifestyle. And so if I look at any successful person, no matter what part of their life it is, they've learned successful habits. They didn't just wake up one day and just says, "I want to be wealthy." They didn't wake up one day and says, "I want to be in shape," and then just boom, they became in shape. They created habits that led them to that ultimate success. And so those are the things that I have seen by being around people that have achieved things at a high level. It all started down with we're developing those habits. No, but what if I didn't grow up with those habits? Then it goes back to what Chris just started to say. Then you got to start surrounding yourself with people that already have those habits. You got to value mentorship. You got to get mentors and people that are around you, and be willing to look at what they're doing and then put yourself into that particular space and start saying that, what is it that you're doing? But when do I need to start that? How do I need to do that? Well, I do want to become wealthy. I'm just going to pray about it. Well, that's good, but I'm just going to tell you right now, and I don't want to make this to sound sacrilegious, but prayer is not a substitute for a plan. You've got to have a plan. You can't just wake up one day and just like, "Hey man, I'm just praying that one day everything's going to turn out." Well, maybe it will. Maybe God will bless you to have all of that. But prayer is not a substitute for a plan. You got to have habits that is going to lead you to something. And then I'm going to pray about this plan that I got, and then hopefully God will find favor in the things that I'm trying to do. But I think that's where it has to start. You got to surround yourself with people that are going where that have already gone where you're trying to go, and start getting mentors and start creating those habits that's going to lead you, daily habits that's going to lead you to getting to where you want to go.
Now, Christopher, your Graduate Wealthy initiative doesn't just teach financial literacy, it creates investors. Why do you believe ownership has to become part of the conversation much earlier in life?
So I think my Graduate Wealthy initiative I kind of give you a little backstory. So it started when I was living in California, and I was asked to speak for different summer camps, and I was really teaching kids on how to invest into the stock market. So what I would do is during that summer camp, normally have like a 2-week camp. I would come in and speak, give them a basic level of finances, how stocks work, how to invest, what a share price is, how do you go, what a platform do you go invested in, how to evaluate a stock, which is a good stock to invest in. So what we would do is that I would break them into groups. And then at the end of the 2-week summer camp, whoever built the portfolio that actually grew the most, I would actually give out scholarships, but not really for scholarships for school or for books, but that money that they would be receiving would be money that they would use to start their first investment account portfolio, right? And so I think it's so important for kids to have the foundation of understanding ownership at an early age, because if we don't understand it then, it's normally too late to where we feel like, man, I went my entire life not owning anything, right? But we're only been taught to own a home, right? We're only been taught to, let me own a car, right? Or so those are basic ownership levels that honestly don't really move the needle, right? Because your own home that you live in, technically it's not an asset. But see, what we were thinking about is other people around us, man, you got to own your home. You got to own your home. Yes, that's a great thing to do. However, what's more important is owning something that's going to produce cash flow and a profit to you, right? Lester just talked about a second ago about the habits, right? That's different for wealthy people, but it's also understanding that keep it basic, right? You gotta spend less than you earn, right? Right. So we can't just have a high spending capacity, right? And on things that are going out, and we're not saving anything. We got to do that. So we have to make sure that we own things, right, at an early age that are producing us income that becomes an asset that's not a liability, right? So that's one thing I really learned at an early age is that, hey, me owning my own home is great, but it doesn't produce income. I know I need to own a house, right? Rental property. I need to own stocks, right? And when you own stocks, some companies that you invest in can actually produce a dividend for you, right? A dividend is like a rent check, right? A monthly rent check that you get from a company that has profits. So those are the things that we start to understand to where you can have a better conversation at an early age and say, man, now I'm actually making moves for me right now and not waiting until my 35, 40, 50 years old and looking back, man, I made all this income. Because most people, think about this, most people will make $1 million in their lifetime, right? If you look from somebody starting working from 21 to 50, they probably earned almost $1 million, right? For most careers, if you cumulative. But then it's about what do we do with what difference do we do with that money? Right? How do we invest it? What do we own from that? Right? What else? How many other pods that we invest in that can produce little forms of money a lot of places, right? So that's what we really want to teach and why we want to do that in an early age. And I think that me with the Graduate Wealthy program that I have, we focus solely on, hey, what can we own? How can we invest? And what can we get back from it as a profit?
Great information. Now, Lester, after more than 30 years serving families, businesses, and churches, what's one financial habit you've seen determine whether a family builds wealth or loses it?
Well, Chris just touched on it. That one habit is they spend less than what they earn. And that is consistent. That has to become a priority. So how do you do that? You don't even do that by accident. Spending, I mean, Corey, that sounds so basic. That sounds so boring. It sounds just like everybody knows that. I mean, I thought you were going to give me this big jewel of nugget right there, man. I loaded you up with that great question, and then it was just like, well, that's a boring answer. Just you spend less than what you earn. But do you understand how basic that sounds, but how few people achieve that? And that's where it all comes back to. But how do you do that? I just did a class. I did a budget. I'm a deacon at my church, and I'm also the financial part at my church. So I do the church budget every year. So this last year, I presented the church budget to all the church leaders, and my pastor says, for the first time, he's looked back and said, and we looked at that budget, and he was just like, Lester, that is so great. But you know what? How few of us actually know how to do that in our personal life. So he asked me, would you be willing to teach a budgeting class to our congregation and show us how to do what you just did for the church, but how to do that in our personal life? And I sat back on that, Corey, and I'm just like, I never even thought about that. We've been doing this for so long, so many things we just take for granted that everybody knows that. Everybody's doing that. And then it always reminds me like, but no, they're not. And so I did. So I sat back and I created this, what I call a controlled spending class. And what that means is instead of talking about a budget, we put together a controlled spending where you can say how you get to where you're spending less than what you earn. You got to account for every dollar before that dollar hits your bank account, before it gets into your hand. You determine where every dollar is going to go in advance, which means you've heard the concept called paying yourself first. So you've got to start out with, I'm going to save X amount of dollars of my check. You decide that up front, what that dollar amount is going to be. And then boom, you set that aside. And now you decide then, how much do I need to be investing in my 401k to get to where Chris just talked about in order for me to accumulate enough money when I turn 60 or 65 or even 50 or 55 to where I know where that next egg of money would generate enough income that I never have to get another paycheck again from a job. What is that number and how much do I need to be saving every month? Then boom, you set that aside. You start putting that money in your 401k. You got that locked in. So now once you're doing those things, now you can go back and sit down with that spreadsheet and start breaking those concepts down and says, now, what do I have left over then is to create my spending. Now I start prioritizing where each dollar is going to go. How much of this dollar that I got is going to go toward a house? How much of that's going to go toward a car? How much is that going to go toward clothing? How much is that going to, and you pre-spend that before that dollar ever hits your bank account. See, those go back to those habits that we talked about once again. It sounds very boring, it sounds very basic, but most people never do that. So when you get to the end, and then you say, well, how come people are not saving more money? Because they're spending it all before you even get to saving. Their priority is not saving. Their priority is spending. Their priority is buying nice things. The priority is looking like that you have succeeded. So I'm buying all the things, and then there's never anything left over to save. So that's where we have to get back to those fundamentals of building that spending plan, having a very disciplined spending plan, having a very disciplined investment plan, and then developing those habits. And then lastly, I would say, Corey, is that now that you've got it, you're a parent, now that you've got it, you've got those things down. You see, now you start having the conversation about, now I want to create generational wealth. Well, you don't create generational wealth just by you becoming wealthy and then you pass on and then just hand over a bunch of money to your children that has never built wealth themselves. Because if you've never taught them those successful habits, as the Bible says, a fool and his money will soon depart. So if you don't teach them what it took for you to become successful, for you to build wealth, when they receive it, it's just a matter of time that money is going to be gone. So what I'm learning to do right now is I'm making it mandatory for my children and my grandchildren to be able to, for I'm starting teaching them those classes. I'm teaching my son-in-laws to be able to learn these particular concepts to where they can start doing those things in their household, and they're teaching those to your kids and teaching those to where now their expectation is different, their knowledge base is going to be different. And guess what? Their expectation, they're starting to expect now to become successful. They expect to become wealthy. They expect to build wealth. And now their habits will follow that. Because when I was a kid, I never expected to become wealthy. So I had habits that followed what my expectations were. But if you can change those expectations, you would change their habits and you would change their outcome.
I'm glad you mentioned that, man, because like I was saying in the intro, man, this is our 200th episode. And I've heard so many brothers and sisters come on this show, and they said that the first generation builds it, second generation spends it, and the third generation destroys it. So a lot of people that I've had that are successful say, why even build generational wealth? Because all they're gonna do is fight over it. So I'm glad you brought that up, man, because I always ask guests that in every show. So I appreciate that.
It's a black man's Sunday.